Good evening, listeners. I'm your host, Timothy. You're tuned into the ghostly broadcast, Paranormal Station. I beam out the signal from my farm while the long nights close in around me and share the testimonies of the supernatural. For millennia of the human experience, we have commonly honored our dead and the places we've left their earthly remains. Colloquially known as graveyards, these somber and pleasant places in the daytime are intended for quiet reflection with the loved ones past. However, graveyards are also places where the veil between us and the world beyond is only a paper-thin veneer. Disturb or upset it, and the spirits can spill forth. We'll hear testimonies from Europe tonight, where our contributors witness the spirits rise from the dead. Our first testimony. Dear Timothy, the war graves of Normandy are truly a sight to behold. From the honored fields of the British to the glorified, grandiose white grave markers of the American ones, I think everyone should see them at least once. One that often gets overlooked is the war graves of the German soldiers. Whether they fought for Nazis or not, all the soldiers fighting were still flesh and blood humans who lived, loved, and died in those northern French hedgerows. I learned that in the most shocking way possible when I visited the German cemetery. The graveyard is much more mournful and somber than the Allies' war graves. Shaded in maple trees where the sun breaks through the canopy in intermittent places, its small black gravestones are placed on the grass in neat rows. Many of them only read that a soldier is buried there. No identification. I knelt down and touched one of the crosses lying flat in the dirt. As I did, a shockwave fired up my arm, and the world around me flickered into darkness. I opened my eyes. The sunny sky had turned overcast and gray. I looked down to see my hands weren't my own, and they were clasped around a wooden rifle. I was crouched in a muddy trench as explosions rang out all around me. I dropped the gun, held my hands to my ears, and screamed. I closed my eyes and begged for it to be over, praying to God that it would stop. I heard voices shouting over the trench. A grenade landed in the trench, and I scrambled away from it in panic. It exploded, and I felt the shock wave move my organs inside of me as the blast left me deaf. As I stood up, confused and disoriented, I looked up and saw an American soldier standing atop the parapet, pointing his rifle right at me. I raised my hands in surrender. "I'm Czech. I don't want to fight," I shouted. A deafening crack rang out, and I felt a thud in my chest. My legs fell from under me, crumpling into a pile in the trench. I tried to breathe, but I could only manage a weak gurgle. I felt icy cold, but I couldn't shiver. Darkness filled my vision, and I felt life leave me. I was back in the graveyard, my hand snapping away from the grave as if it had touched a hot pan. Life returned to me like a lightning bolt to my heart. After composing myself, I figured it was time to leave. Walking through the gates, I turned to see the sign, which read, "A graveyard for soldiers, not all of whom had chosen either the cause or the fight. They too have found rest in our soil of France." It seemed fitting after what I'd just witnessed. I don't know how, and I wouldn't have ever described myself as sensitive to paranormal experiences, if that is even a thing, Timothy. Still, that man had his story told to at least one person, and he is remembered. Kind regards, Harold. Thank you for your testimony, Harold. War is hell brought to earth, and each death is a needless tragedy. It is no surprise that it leaves such a stain on the mortal world for the spirits to emerge through. Our next testimony comes from the farthest north that any human settlement has gone before. It is from Ella in Longyearbyen, Norway. Dear Timothy, Longyearbyen is an interesting place. Not only is it the most northern town that people live in continuously, but it's also famous for a more morbid reason. It is illegal to die there. Although that might seem a bit macabre, it's not like they take you out of town and put you down like a dying dog. It's actually for a very practical reason. If you're buried there, you will not decompose. You will be preserved for all time in the permafrost. You and whatever illness or disease killed you, which makes burying people there a bit of a health hazard. To that end, there is only one graveyard in town. One with only 11 people buried there. All of them died of Spanish flu in the early 20th century. Those 11 people have possibly the only sample of the virus frozen in their corpses. That graveyard could hold the keys to understanding the pandemic and, after COVID, could also hold the answers to preventing future pandemics. Getting the necessary permits to travel there and exhume just one grave took years, but we had our chance. So, in the peak of summer, a team of us traveled to that cold northern town to get to work. Even with the ground exposed and the soil supposedly softer, it still took us well into the night to exhume the corpse. It is eerie there. The sun circled the sky, never setting. Like God himself was staring down, judging what we were doing. When we finally broke through, we gently hauled the corpse out of the grave while clad in sterile suits. I'd expected to see a man frozen in time, but it was a much ghastlier sight than I'd been prepared for. His face was stuck in a tired, frozen grimace. He bore his teeth in a flat, open mouth below sad, glassy eyes. It's an unsettling thing to see a man who's been dead for over 100 years, looking like he'd only died a few days ago. We prepared him for travel as respectfully as possible, and then returned to our hotel to clean up and sleep. During the night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep even behind the thick blackout curtains that kept the never-ending sunshine out of the room. I kept seeing that man's frozen, mummified face. I got up and headed for the window. I drew back the curtain and peeked out into the perpetual daylight of the midsummer night. In my reflection, I saw his face staring back at me. His hands smashed through the window and clasped around my throat. Icy fingers gripped my windpipe as shards of glass jammed into my face and neck. I grappled and clawed to try and break free, but it was no good. He closed in and let out a low, guttural moan as he breathed out cold, frozen breath onto my face. I woke up in a jolt, coughing and spluttering. I grabbed at my throat. Even though it was free of his grip, I could feel the cold grip like it was still there. My throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming all night. At first, I thought that it had been a dream, but when we returned to the site in the morning, we found the body bag had been ripped open. Not unzipped or cut with a knife, it was torn open from the inside. In the open grave, the body was lying still, staring up with that empty, glass-eyed gaze. Over the next few days, I got sicker and sicker, to the point where I was sent back by the team and quarantined. When I restlessly slept through feverish dreams, I kept seeing his face and felt his hands clasp tighter and tighter around my throat. The dreams subsided when my fever broke, and I started to recover. When I was well enough to work again, I decided to cut ties with the team and focus on something else. Despite our noble cause, something changed in me after that, and I wanted nothing to do with it anymore. Yours sincerely, Ella. Thank you for your testimony, Ella. Many cultures throughout the world do not take kindly to disturbing the final resting places of the dead, no matter the cause and for good reason. The dead prefer to rest in peace. Our next testimony comes from Alisha in London. Dear Timothy, my sister Jamie and I didn't have the best time growing up. We were bounced around different foster homes, and it never really got easier until we both grew up. I managed to break the cycle, but I guess she didn't. The last I'd heard, she'd fallen in with the wrong sorts, and when she disappeared, the only person left to care was me. The police didn't help. They're so swamped lately that the law hardly even applies anymore. Anarchy in the UK. I won't dress up what my sister was doing when she went missing. She was doing the only thing she could to get enough money for a fix. Naturally, I was expecting the worst. Another working girl bumped off by a violent man. Despite my attempts to help her in the past and being refused at every turn, she was still my sister, and it was only right to try and figure out the truth. This led me to the last place she'd been seen. The place is a beautiful, leafy maze of tombs, headstones, and grave markers during the day. But I'd heard rumors that she and some of her friends were taking specific clients there. To listen to her friends tell it, some fucked up creeps wanted to get sucked off in a graveyard, so there was a market for it. I thought that if I could at least catch a few in the act, I might be able to ask them if they'd seen my sister or heard anything about her. It didn't take long for me to hear voices whispering in the dark. I went through the winding pathways amongst the trees, graves and overgrown ivy, following the sound of hushed chatter. I peeked around a corner and saw them in a clearing. 3 hooded figures were standing over a spread-out sheet of clear plastic. Lying naked in the middle of it was my sister and 2 other girls. I hid in the undergrowth behind a headstone and watched. Jamie and the other girls didn't move, but I could see the rise and fall of her chest. She was still breathing. I dialed 999 and frantically whispered for the police. After I explained everything, they said to stay put and wait for them to come. The hooded figures had stopped chatting idly. Each of them had moved to stand at the head of one of the women, my sister in the middle. I could see the man in the middle reading from a leather-bound book in what sounded like Latin. As he read, the 3 drew shiny daggers from their robes and raised them above their victims. I couldn't wait any longer for the police to arrive. I knew I was outnumbered, but I hoped the shock of being discovered would be enough to make them run. "Stop!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. The 2 at the side stopped to look at me and stepped away nervously. The man in the middle noticed them move, stopped reading from the book and yelled, "Don't move. We can't interrupt this." At that, the book fell from his hands and landed next to Jamie's head. Blood poured from his eyes, and he screamed in agony. Falling to his knees, wounds began to open in his skin, and blood spilt out everywhere. The other 2 weren't spared either. Some invisible force kicked them to their knees, pulled their arms back until the bones snapped, and then their stomachs opened up. Steaming intestines spilt onto the floor while they violently shook against whatever was holding them there. By the time the police arrived, the 3 of them were nothing but a gory mess on the floor. I'd covered the women up as best I could and cradled Jamie in my arms. It's been a few weeks since it happened, and Jamie has been living with me. She won't talk to me about what happened. I was happy to let her process it all and talk to me when she was ready until I came home from work one day. Jamie was already asleep, and I tiptoed past her into the bathroom. The bin beside the toilet was overflowing with used pregnancy tests. Every single one of them was positive. Yours, Alisha. Thank you, Alisha, for your testimony. Necromancy is the work of devils and demons. Those who live by its sword die by it. I wish you and your sister all the best. Our final testimony of the evening comes from Mara in Prague. Dear Timothy, I know it might sound like my boyfriend. Jan and I were asking for trouble when we walked around the graveyard of an old psychiatric hospital. The place is beautiful and quite a popular place to visit. It was actually my idea to go there. It was a lazy Sunday, and I figured it would be nice to go out and get some fresh air together. He'd never been before, and I wanted to show him all the cool ruins and old graves. So we set out and were on the grounds in no time. We held hands as we walked the paths through the trees and shrubbery. I pointed out the barely visible grave markers and took Jan to all the little points of interest I'd told him about. After we'd stopped to sit down and drink the coffee liqueur we'd brought in a thermos, we headed back to the bus stop to head home. That's when I noticed that I didn't recognize where we were. I was sure in my head of our direction, but it was like I'd been turned around. As much as I racked my brain to try and get my bearings, I couldn't figure out which way to go. The two of us wandered around the park until well after dark. At that point, we reached the chapel ruins again, entirely by accident. Jan was getting visibly frustrated, and I felt guilty about bringing us both here. Tired and hungry, we huddled in the ruins, where we fell asleep. When we woke up, it was still dark. I saw Jan staring at his watch in bemusement. I asked him what time it was. "I don't know," he said. "Look," he gestured with his watch hand, showing the watch face to me. It was spinning rapidly clockwise with all of its hands going around and around and around. After that, we didn't know how long we wandered around the cold, empty park. Jan was getting angrier and more frustrated, cursing loudly at everything. I was just getting sadder. I wanted to curl up and cry. I did a few times, but Jan would drag me to my feet and yell at me to pull it together. The last time I did, he just stood over me, scowling. "You're pathetic, Mara," he spat. I just cried, sobbing loudly in the darkness. Jan turned and walked away. I don't know how many hours went by, but the next time I saw him, he was coming back the other way. "Jan," I called out to him. He didn't even register it. He just kept on slowly walking towards me. I stood up as he approached. He looked like he'd been out here for weeks. His shoes had fallen to pieces, and he was leaving bloody footprints behind him. His face had the scraggly hairs of a growing beard, and his eyes were hollow and empty. He looked through me and walked right past without saying a word. "Jan," I called to him again, but he didn't listen and walked away into the darkness. I woke up in daylight, in the middle of the path. I could see people walking around the park. It was just as it had been the day we arrived. Jan was nowhere to be seen. The only signs left of him were rows and rows of bloody footprints surrounding where I'd slept on the ground. Timothy, I don't know what happened to us or where we went. I don't know if Jan is still there, wandering the paths repeatedly. I'm just glad that whatever madness trapped us there let me go in the end. Yours, Mara. Thank you for your testimony, Mara. The infinite void of the spirit realm can trap a person, warp their mind, and bring out the foulest in us all. Tread lightly and take care of yourself. This concludes our evening's testimonies. If you enjoyed this, listener, and would like to be notified of our latest broadcast, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon and join us for the next evening of Ghostly Broadcast, Paranormal Station. I've been your host, Timothy. Have a safe night, listeners.